Keanu Reeves drives down the empty highway, his mind clear, his destination unimportant. But then, headlights appear in his rearview mirror. Motorcycles. A low, menacing rumble grows louder as the riders close in, flanking his SUV. One slams a fist against his window. Another veers dangerously close to his bumper. At first, it seems like a reckless game, a group looking for trouble. But Keanu recognizes the signs. This isn't random. They want to corner him, force him off the road, make him an easy target. What the bikers don't know is that Keanu Reeves has a black belt in karate and years of combat training. They think they found a victim. Instead, they've just picked the wrong fight. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The afternoon sun was slowly descending over the plains of Texas, casting long golden shadows on the endless road. Keanu Reeves adjusted his sunglasses and sank deeper into the leather seat of his SUV, enjoying the solitude of the open road. This trip had been long awaited. The pressures of his unique life, the constant scrutiny, the endless demands, and the lack of privacy had become overwhelming. Here, far from the chaos of big cities and familiar faces, he could think clearly. The landscape was hypnotizing in its simplicity. A vast expanse of rolling hills dotted with small clusters of mesquites and the occasional windmill creaking in the distance. Keanu had been driving for hours, alternating between classical compositions and indie rock on his playlist, a reflection of his eclectic tastes. He had mapped out a route that avoided highways, opting instead for the charm of back roads. There was something liberating about being surrounded by nothing but nature and the open sky. However, as the sun dipped lower, the desolation of the landscape began to weigh on him. He realized that he hadn't seen another vehicle for over an hour. The solitude that had initially felt freeing now carried an unsettling undertone. He glanced at his phone, which rested on the passenger seat. No signal. Keanu frowned but ignored it, reminding himself that this was all part of the adventure. The first sign of trouble appeared when he crested a small hill and saw the glint of metal in the distance. A group of motorcycles was parked at the roadside, their riders lingering nearby. As he approached, they simultaneously revved their engines, the deep roar of the motorcycles echoing across the silent landscape. Keanu felt a slight unease but continued driving at a steady pace. However, the motorcyclists didn't stay put. As soon as he passed them, they roared to life like predators on the hunt. Looking in the rearview mirror, Keanu saw them merge onto the road, quickly closing the distance. At first, he tried to ignore them, telling himself it was nothing, maybe just a group looking for some fun. But the way they maneuvered, surrounding him and cutting him off, told a different story. A couple of riders positioned themselves on either side of his SUV, their faces partially covered with bandanas. One of them slapped the door of his car with an open palm, a sharp sound that sent a shiver down his spine. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. Keanu had been in tense situations before, though nothing quite like this. "Keep a cool head," he murmured to himself, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The road stretched out ahead, empty and unforgiving. The sun had nearly set, and the sky was painted in crimson and violet hues. He thought about accelerating to leave them behind, but the narrow road and the proximity of the motorcycles made it too risky. The bikers weren't just following him, they were testing him, playing with his nerves. Finally, they forced him to slow down and stop by the side of the road. Keanu's heart pounded in his chest. He had no choice but to stop. The group surrounded his car, their engines idling menacingly. He took a deep breath and assessed his options, his mind working quickly. Years of martial arts training kicked in instinctively. The leader of the group dismounted his bike, his boots crunching against the gravel as he approached. His leather vest bore patches that suggested a dangerous reputation, and his eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and threat. Keanu rolled down his window slightly, just enough to hear the man's rough voice. "Nice car for a place like this," the motorcyclist said with a mocking grin. "What brings you out here, rich boy?" Keanu met his gaze directly, his expression calm but cautious. "Just passing through," he replied firmly, showing no fear. The motorcyclist chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Well, you've got a long way ahead," he said, gesturing toward the empty road. "Maybe you need some company." The other bikers laughed, their voices echoing in the vast empty landscape. Keanu didn't join in. He didn't need to. Instead, he slowly opened the door and stepped out of the car. His imposing figure caught the bikers off guard. He stood tall and firm, scanning the group with a quiet intensity. The leader's laughter faded, his smirk disappearing for a brief moment. Keanu noticed it, a fleeting flicker of doubt. He straightened his posture, letting his years of discipline speak for him. He wasn't looking for trouble, but if it came, he was ready. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the landscape into shadows. In the twilight, tension crackled like static electricity, and Keanu knew the night was about to take a dangerous turn. "What's a city boy like you doing on our road?" the leader asked. Keanu held his gaze, his face calm, but his mind worked rapidly. He understood the dynamic unfolding before him. It was about dominance, about seeing how much fear they could instill in him. His instincts, honed by years of martial arts training, told him to remain composed and avoid escalating the situation. "Just passing through," Keanu repeated, his voice firm. He kept his hands relaxed at his sides but ready. The leader let out a harsh laugh and the other motorcyclists joined in, their laughter sharp and mocking. "Trouble?" the man repeated, leaning in toward him. "Oh, you have no idea what trouble is." One of the bikers, a thin man with a long ponytail and a deep scar across his cheek, spoke up. "Maybe we should teach him a lesson, huh? Show him how we treat outsiders." The suggestion hung in the air like a dark cloud. Keanu subtly shifted his weight, his eyes scanning the other motorcyclists. There were 6 in total, each armed in some way, chains, knives, and the brute strength of men accustomed to violence. Now they were closing in, tightening the circle. The leader took another step forward, his grin widening. "You've got 2 options, kid. Hand over your wallet, your keys. Maybe we let you walk away." He let the threat hang in the air, unspoken but clear. Keanu felt his pulse quicken, but he didn't let it show. "I appreciate the offer," he said evenly, "but I'll have to decline." The leader's smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. Wrong answer. At his signal, one of the bikers lunged at Keanu from behind, trying to grab him. But Keanu was ready. He spun smoothly, catching the man's wrist and twisting it in one fluid motion. The biker let out a cry of pain as Keanu shoved him backward, sending him crashing into another member of the group. The swift display of skill took the others by surprise, and for a moment they hesitated. Keanu seized the opportunity to speak, his voice calm but firm. "I don't want trouble, but I'm not an easy target. Let's walk away before someone gets hurt." The bikers exchanged uncertain glances, but the leader wasn't willing to back down. His pride was at stake, and he wasn't about to let an outsider humiliate him. He pulled out a knife, its blade gleaming under the dim light. "Looks like you've got some fight in you," he said darkly. "Good. I was hoping this would be interesting." The circle tightened again, and Keanu knew there was no talking his way out of this. His stance shifted, subtle but deliberate, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The bikers didn't realize it yet, but they had underestimated him, and they were about to learn just how big a mistake that was. The leader lunged forward, knife in hand, aiming straight for Keanu's abdomen. Time seemed to slow as Keanu's instincts took over. Years of training kicked in. He sidestepped the attack effortlessly, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it with force. The knife clattered to the ground, its metallic clang echoing ominously in the night. The leader staggered back, clutching his wrist, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and shock. "You're gonna regret that," he growled. Keanu didn't reply. He stood lightly on his feet, weight balanced, hands raised and ready. His posture was calm but authoritative, every movement sending a clear message. He wasn't someone to mess with. The other bikers, momentarily stunned by Keanu's speed and precision, began to react. One of them, a burly man with a chain wrapped around his waist, growled and charged at him, swinging the chain in a wide arc aimed at Keanu's head. Keanu ducked just in time, the chain whistling past his ear. Before the man could recover, Keanu stepped forward, delivering a palm strike to his chest, followed by a low sweep that sent him crashing to the ground. The other bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their once unwavering confidence now wavering. The gasps and groans of pain filled the air as Keanu continued to evade and overpower his attackers. His movements were fluid and controlled, each strike and counter reflecting his discipline and years of training. Despite being outnumbered, he remained calm, his breathing steady and his focus unshaken. The leader, still clutching his injured wrist, shouted orders to the remaining motorcyclists. "What are you waiting for? Take him down," he roared, his voice laced with frustration and desperation. A younger, slimmer biker hesitated before stepping forward. He wielded an iron rod, its steel glinting menacingly under the moonlight. Swinging it with all his strength, he aimed for Keanu. But Keanu was faster. He dodged the attack and caught the rod mid-swing, yanking it out of the biker's grip in a swift motion. Using the same weapon, he disarmed another motorcyclist who had been reaching for his own weapon. The dynamics of the fight had shifted entirely. What had started as an attempt to intimidate and dominate Keanu had turned into a desperate struggle for the motorcyclists. Their laughter and taunts had vanished, replaced by clenched teeth and frantic movements. Keanu, while still in control, knew he couldn't lower his guard. The bikers had underestimated him at first, but desperation could make them more dangerous. Quickly, he scanned the scene. 3 bikers lay groaning on the ground, while the remaining 3, including the leader, were still standing but visibly shaken. "You've had enough fun," Keanu said in a firm but calm voice. "Walk away now, and no one else gets hurt." For a moment, it seemed like his words might work. The bikers hesitated, their confidence clearly wavering. But the leader, wounded in both pride and body, stepped forward, his eyes burning with fury. "This isn't over," he spat, signaling the others to regroup. Keanu's jaw tightened. He knew this wasn't finished. The motorcyclists weren't just trying to win, they needed to salvage their reputation. And Keanu was prepared to show them that neither bravado nor numbers could break his resolve. The remaining bikers quickly reorganized, their movements now more precise, driven by a mix of anger and humiliation. The leader, still holding his injured wrist, barked orders like a drill sergeant. "Surround him! Don't let him move!" The group acted in unison, forming a loose circle around Keanu. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced with a cold determination, the kind that made them even more dangerous. Keanu scanned their positions, calculating distances, angles, and possible escape routes. He knew they were trying to limit his mobility, but in their desperation, they had left gaps in their formation. "Come on, rich boy," one of the bikers taunted, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see what you've got now." Keanu didn't respond. He focused on his breathing, keeping it steady while sharpening his senses. Every shift in weight, every glance exchanged between the bikers was information to him. He knew the key to winning wasn't brute strength, but strategy and patience. The first biker, a stocky man with a chain, charged at him. He swung the chain wildly, aiming for Keanu's head. Keanu ducked and sidestepped, letting the attack miss completely. As the man lost his balance, Keanu delivered a swift strike to his knee, sending him to the ground with a pained groan. Another biker saw his chance and attacked from behind with a broken bottle. Keanu smoothly turned, grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it until he dropped the bottle with a yelp. With a quick shove, Keanu sent him stumbling into another biker, tangling them both up as they collapsed onto the ground. The leader watched the scene unfold, his frustration mounting. "Idiots, stop attacking him one by one," he shouted. "Surround him and hit him all at once." Keanu felt the shift immediately. The bikers were no longer acting individually. They were coordinating their movements, closing the circle like a pack of wolves. He knew the pressure was increasing, but he also knew he still had the advantage. This wasn't just a physical fight, it was a battle of wills. And Keanu wasn't about to break. "I don't need to win," Keanu said calmly, his voice unwavering despite the tension. "I just have to outlast you." The leader's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. He gestured to his men again, this time instructing them to flank Keanu from both sides. The bikers obeyed, their movements now more deliberate. But Keanu could see the exhaustion on their faces. Their confidence was crumbling, replaced by frustration and creeping doubt. Keanu took a step back, his gaze shifting to the horizon. The moon hung high in the sky, bathing the scene in its pale light. He knew the bikers wouldn't let him leave without a final showdown. But he also knew that the more they pressured him, the more mistakes they would make, and he was ready to exploit each one. When the leader stepped forward, pulling a second knife from his belt, Keanu prepared for the next phase of the fight. He was no longer just surviving, he was taking control, one calculated move at a time. The bikers believed they had him trapped, but Keanu was about to show them that the only ones caught in a trap were themselves. The motorcyclists advanced, their movements more coordinated but still tainted by the same overconfidence that had been their downfall so far. They had underestimated him, assuming he was just another privileged man who wouldn't last in a real fight. But Keanu's calm demeanor and measured responses had already shattered their sense of security, and now he planned to use that to his advantage. His eyes locked onto the chain that one of the bikers had dropped earlier. It lay gleaming on the ground a few feet away, coiled like a snake ready to strike. In one sudden motion, Keanu lunged for it, rolling smoothly before rising to his feet, the chain now in his grip. The heavy links clinked ominously as he swung it with precision, getting a feel for its weight. For a brief moment, the bikers froze, their surprise evident. The leader's face twisted in fury as he shouted, "Get him! Don't let him humiliate us!" The first to attack was the thin biker with the bandana. Still holding a knife, he lunged at Keanu, but Keanu swung the chain expertly, wrapping it around the man's wrist. With a sharp tug, he disarmed him, the knife clattering onto the asphalt. Before the biker could react, Keanu delivered a kick to his chest, sending him sprawling out of the fight. The others hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Their arrogance had cracked under the weight of Keanu's skill and determination. "What's wrong with you?" the leader growled, furious. "He's just one guy." A larger, slower biker, armed with a baseball bat, stepped forward. He swung the bat with full force, aiming for Keanu's ribs. Keanu dodged effortlessly, using the chain to deflect the next swing. The clash of metal echoed through the night. In the brief moment when the biker lost his balance, Keanu acted. He coiled the chain around the bat, yanking it from the man's hands. The bat hit the ground, and as the biker stumbled forward, Keanu took him down with a spinning kick to the torso, leaving him gasping on the ground. In the brief moment when the biker lost his balance, Keanu acted. He coiled the chain around the bat, yanking it from the man's hands. The bat hit the ground, and as the biker stumbled forward, Keanu took him down with a spinning kick to the torso, leaving him gasping on the ground. Keanu adjusted his stance, the chain swinging lightly in his hand. The leader was more experienced and calculated than the others, and his movements showed it. He didn't attack recklessly like his subordinates. He approached cautiously, his knife glinting dangerously under the moonlight. "You're good," the leader admitted, his voice low and threatening, "but you're out of your league." "We'll see," Keanu replied firmly, his stance unwavering. The leader lunged, slashing with precision. Keanu used the chain to block the blade, the two moving in a tight, calculated dance. Each attack met with a swift counter. They circled each other, their movements fluid and deliberate, like two predators fighting for dominance. The other bikers watched in silence, their confidence completely shattered. Keanu feinted left, baiting the leader into a misstep. When the man overextended, Keanu seized his moment, wrapping the chain around the leader's forearm, locking his knife hand, and delivering a sharp elbow strike to his jaw. The leader staggered but quickly retaliated, his blade flashing in a desperate counterattack. The fight was fast and brutal, every move precise. But Keanu had the advantage, his training, his patience, and his unwavering focus. Finally, he saw the opening. The leader's grip on the knife weakened as exhaustion set in. Keanu struck, disarming him and sending the weapon flying into the darkness. Before the leader could react, Keanu twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. "This is over," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "Tell them to stop." The leader, his face a mix of rage and reluctant respect, looked around at his defeated men. Finally, he nodded grimly. "Drop your weapons," he ordered, his voice thick with resentment. The remaining bikers hesitated but eventually obeyed, stepping back and lowering their weapons. Keanu released the leader and stepped away, still on guard. "You got lucky," the leader growled. The leader spat the words as he stood up, rubbing his arm. "But don't think this is over." Keanu didn't respond. He simply watched as the motorcyclists retreated, the roar of their engines shattering the silence of the night. The leader was the last to leave, casting one final defiant look at Keanu before revving his engine and vanishing down the road. The moon shone brightly overhead, illuminating the deserted highway. Keanu remained still, his breathing controlled as the adrenaline gradually gave way to a resolute calm. He had faced adversity and emerged victorious, but he knew the leader's final words weren't an empty threat. Fixing his gaze on the horizon, Keanu exhaled slowly. Whatever was coming next, he was ready. As he picked up the keys to his SUV and climbed back into the driver's seat, Keanu allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The fight had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, forcing him to draw on every ounce of skill and determination. But he had prevailed. Starting the engine, he drove off into the night, a renewed sense of confidence settling over him. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on, just as he had tonight. The road ahead stretched endlessly, its eerie silence broken only by the rhythmic hum of his tires against the asphalt. The vast Texan plains were now shrouded in an oppressive stillness. His muscles ached, his knuckles bore the faint bruises of the brutal fight, but his mind had never been sharper, and the leader's last words played over in his head. "This isn't over," Keanu exhaled slowly, steadying his breath. He glanced in the rearview mirror. No sign of the bikers, but the unease in his chest didn't fade. His instincts told him that these weren't the kind of men to accept defeat quietly. The fight had been a blow to their pride, and for men like them, reputation was everything. Keanu's SUV roared back to life as he merged onto the road. The rhythmic hum of the tires was the only sound breaking the silence. He maintained a steady speed, his eyes shifting between the road ahead and the mirrors, scanning for any sign of pursuit. The moon hung high, its pale glow casting long shadows over the desolate landscape. As he drove, the feeling of isolation deepened. There were no street lights, no passing cars, just an endless stretch of highway flanked by dark, featureless terrain. It felt as though the world had shrunk, leaving him alone in a vast and empty expanse. Yet Keanu knew he wasn't completely alone. Though the bikers had retreated, he couldn't shake the sensation that they were still watching, lurking just beyond his sight. The leader's final look had been more than just anger. It had been a promise. In the distance, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. As he neared, Keanu realized it was a small roadside diner, its flickering neon sign a beacon in the darkness. The sight was a relief, a sign of civilization in the middle of nowhere. He decided to stop, not just to regroup but to assess his next move. The crunch of gravel under his tires marked his arrival in the parking lot. The diner was modest, its windows glowing warmly against the cold night air. Only a few vehicles were parked outside: an old rusted pickup, an aging sedan, and a gleaming semi-truck with a long trailer. Keanu stepped out of his SUV, his tall figure silhouetted against the dim light. Every movement was deliberate, his senses sharp as he scanned the surroundings. Satisfied that there was no immediate threat, he headed inside. The bell over the door jingled softly as he entered. The diner was nearly empty, save for a grizzled trucker nursing a cup of coffee at the counter and an elderly couple seated by the window. The air smelled of fried bacon and stale coffee, a comforting contrast to the tension outside. Keanu took a seat at the counter, nodding politely at the trucker who regarded him with quiet curiosity. A middle-aged waitress with a kind but tired face approached, a notepad in hand. "What can I get you, hun?" she asked in a friendly tone. "Just coffee, please," Keanu replied, his voice steady but firm. As she poured his cup, the trucker leaned slightly toward him, unable to contain his curiosity. "Looks like you've had a rough night," he said, his voice gravelly. Keanu met his gaze briefly, noting the man's weathered face and keen eyes. "Something like that," he admitted, keeping his answer vague. The trucker let out a short chuckle before growing serious. "Let me guess," he said, setting his cup down. "You ran into those bikers, didn't you?" Keanu narrowed his eyes slightly. "You've seen them?" "Seen them? Heard plenty about them," The trucker replied, shaking his head. "They like to prowl these roads looking for trouble with anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Always lurking." Keanu nodded, his suspicions confirmed. "They're persistent," the trucker added, watching Keanu closely. "Here's a piece of advice. Those guys don't like being humiliated. If you embarrass them, they'll come back. They don't know how to let things go." Keanu appreciated the warning, though it was nothing he hadn't already considered. "Thanks," he said simply, taking a sip of his coffee. The trucker eyed him with a hint of respect. "You fought back, didn't you? You don't seem like the kind to just roll over." Keanu gave a faint smile. Didn't have much of a choice. For a moment, the diner was filled with nothing but the low hum of conversation and the clinking of coffee cups. Keanu left the roadside diner and continued driving. He drove for half an hour. But then, something changed. A sound in the distance, a deep rumbling growl, sent a chill through Keanu's spine. Motorcycles. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Sure enough, tiny pinpricks of light appeared on the horizon. The roar of the engines grew louder, an unmistakable menacing snarl. Keanu's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had anticipated this. The headlights multiplied, spreading across the darkness like the eyes of a predator. The bikers had found him, and this time, they weren't playing. Keanu pressed down on the accelerator, the SUV surging forward as he calculated his options. The road ahead stretched endlessly into the night, with no sign of civilization in sight. Running wasn't an option, not on a road like this, where the speed and maneuverability of the motorcycles gave them the advantage. He needed a plan, something that would give him the upper hand. The bikers closed in, their headlights illuminating the road behind him. Keanu counted at least 6 of them, their engines growling like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. He clenched his jaw, his mind racing. They wouldn't just let him go. They wanted to finish what they had started. As they approached, they began to fan out strategically. One biker pulled up alongside his SUV, pounding his fist against the passenger side window. Another accelerated behind him, riding dangerously close to his bumper. They were trying to box him in, to force him off the road. Keanu stayed focused, gripping the wheel tightly. His mind cycled through everything he had learned from years of training. Control your breathing. Stay calm. Think ahead. His eyes scanned the terrain, searching for anything that could give him an advantage. Up ahead, he spotted a sharp curve in the road, flanked by steep embankments and jagged rock outcroppings. It was risky, but it might be his only chance. He tightened his grip on the wheel, preparing himself. As he neared the curve, he tapped the brakes lightly, just enough to make the bikers close in, thinking they had him. But the moment he reached the bend, he jerked the wheel sharply, sending the SUV skidding toward the embankment. The sudden movement caught the bikers off guard. They scrambled to react, their formations breaking apart as they tried to avoid a collision. One of them lost control completely, his bike skidding out on the gravel before crashing hard onto the side of the road. Keanu corrected the skid with precision, regaining control as he sped out of the curve. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw the fallen biker being helped up by his companions. Their pursuit had been momentarily disrupted, but not for long. The leader of the bikers emerged from the pack, his silhouette unmistakable against the glare of the headlights. Keanu could feel the man's fury and determination as he closed the distance once again. The chase was far from over, but Keanu knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going down without a fight. Up ahead, a faint glow appeared on the horizon. As he neared, Keanu realized it was another roadside diner, its neon lights a beacon in the darkness. This one seemed more crowded, with several vehicles, including large semi-trucks, parked outside. A surge of hope filled Keanu. People, witnesses, potential allies. The bikers either didn't notice or didn't care about the diner. Keanu swerved into the gravel parking lot, slowing just enough to maintain control while kicking up a cloud of dust. He maneuvered between the parked trucks, coming to a stop near the entrance. In one swift motion, he got out of the SUV. His tall frame immediately caught the attention of the diner's patrons, who watched through the large glass windows. He walked briskly but with calculated composure, his posture steady despite the chaos unfolding behind him. The diner's entrance bell jingled violently as he pushed through the door. Conversations hushed. The room was filled with truckers, travelers, and locals, faces a mix of curiosity and concern as they turned to look at him. Keanu quickly scanned the room, evaluating the crowd. Behind the counter stood a burly man in his 40s, likely the owner, arms crossed over his chest with a wary expression. One of the truckers, an older man with a graying beard, slowly rose from his seat, adjusting his cap. "Those guys again," the trucker muttered. "They've been terrorizing this highway for years." Another trucker nodded, his jaw clenched. "They don't like losing. If they followed you, it's 'cause you embarrassed them." Outside, the roar of motorcycles grew louder. Tension thickened in the diner. The bikers had arrived, their headlights slicing through the dust and illuminating the front windows. "They won't come in peacefully," Keanu said, turning to the truckers. "I can handle them, but if anyone else gets involved, this could escalate." The diner owner shook his head firmly. "Not in my place," he said. "This place is neutral ground. If they start trouble, we handle it together." Keanu nodded, appreciating the man's resolve. The bell above the diner's door clattered violently as the leader of the bikers stepped inside. His expression was twisted with fury, his movements sharp and full of pent-up aggression. His men stood just outside, their silhouettes dark against the blinding headlights of their bikes. "You've got guts coming here," the leader sneered, his voice dripping with venom. His boots thudded against the floor as he advanced, scanning the room with narrowed eyes. Keanu didn't move. He stood near the counter, his posture calm but unyielding. "I didn't run," he said, his voice steady. "I just chose the battleground." The tension in the diner was suffocating. The truckers and locals who had been watching in uneasy silence slowly shifted. Some reached for their coffee mugs, others straightened in their seats, every movement deliberate. It wasn't just curiosity in their eyes anymore. It was quiet resolve. The leader took another step forward, sizing up the room. "I don't care who's here," he growled. "I came for him." Then the sound of a bolt slamming into place cut through the air. From behind the counter, the diner owner, a broad middle-aged man with thick arms and a no-nonsense glare, had pulled out an M16 rifle. He rested it against the counter with practiced ease, his fingers firm on the grip. "I don't think you understand where you are," the owner said, his voice steady. The leader hesitated, his eyes flicking to the weapon. His sneer faltered for a fraction of a second before he forced it back onto his face. "You think that scares me?" he scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual arrogance. Across the room, the old trucker with the graying beard stood up. He reached into his worn leather jacket and pulled out a revolver, cocking it with a steady hand. His expression was unreadable, but his sharp eyes locked onto the leader with unflinching focus. "You boys picked the wrong place," the trucker said. One of the bikers at the door shuffled uncomfortably. Boss?" "Shut up," the leader snapped, but his voice had lost some of its bite. Then, another sound, a phone call being made. The waitress, who had been standing quietly behind the counter, had the phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, officer," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "A gang of bikers is threatening people at my diner. We need backup now." She glanced up, her expression unshaken. "They're armed." The leader's jaw clenched. The situation had shifted. He wasn't just facing Keanu anymore. He was facing an entire diner full of people who weren't afraid of him. A low murmur spread among the other truckers and locals. A few more reached into their jackets, making it clear that they weren't about to be intimidated. The bikers at the door exchanged glances. The confidence they had earlier was slipping. The leader looked from the M16 to the revolver, then to the phone in the waitress's hand. Sirens weren't audible yet, but they all knew it wouldn't take long for the police to show up on a quiet highway like this. Keanu could see it. The hesitation, the fear creeping into their expressions. The leader exhaled sharply, then turned toward his men. "Let's go," he muttered under his breath. "Boss?" one of the bikers asked, clearly confused. "I said let's go," the leader barked. Without another word, the group backed away, their boots crunching against the gravel as they hurried to their bikes. Engines revved, headlights swung, and within seconds, they peeled out of the parking lot, disappearing into the night. The tension in the diner remained thick for a moment longer. The owner kept his grip on the rifle, the trucker didn't lower his gun, and Keanu remained exactly where he was, watching the red taillights fade into the distance. Then, the waitress exhaled and placed the phone back on the receiver. "Guess they weren't as tough as they thought," the trucker muttered, spinning his revolver before slipping it back into his jacket. The owner shook his head. "Cowards." Keanu turned toward the window. The night was quiet again, the dust settling from the bikers' hasty retreat. One of the truckers chuckled. "I hope they learned their lesson." Keanu smirked slightly. "They will." And with that, he returned to his seat, picking up his coffee as if nothing had happened. Later, he slid back into the SUV, the cool leather pressing against his back as he adjusted the rearview mirror. His own reflection stared back at him, eyes sharper, jaw set with newfound resolve. He had faced danger head-on. He had proven, not just to others but to himself, that he could stand his ground. The engine roared to life as he pulled onto the road again, the open highway stretching endlessly before him. The first rays of sunlight illuminated the pavement, and Keanu felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer the same man who had started this journey. The fights, the pursuit, the tense moments of survival had forged him into something stronger, revealing a depth of resilience he hadn't fully recognized before. The memory of the bikers still lingered in his mind. The leader's final words had been a promise, not an empty threat. Men like him didn't forget a slight, especially one that wounded their pride. Keanu knew they might come for him again, tonight, next week, or further down the road. But instead of fear, he felt only a calm certainty. He had faced them once and won, and he was ready to do it again if necessary. As the miles stretched behind him, his thoughts drifted to the people he had met. The truckers in the diner, the hardened owner who had stood firm against trouble. They reminded him that even in the most desolate places, there was strength and solidarity. It wasn't just his martial arts training that had carried him through the night. It was the lesson that resilience wasn't always a solitary effort. A sign ahead caught his attention, an upcoming rest stop. Keanu decided to pull over, stepping out to stretch his legs and clear his mind. The place was simple, a few picnic tables beneath an old oak tree, a vending machine humming quietly in the corner. Gravel crunched under his boots as he stood there, taking in the vastness of the open plains. This land was tough, relentless, but also beautiful in its simplicity. It reminded him of the challenges he had faced, raw, unforgiving, but ultimately conquerable. Taking a swig from a water bottle, Keanu fixed his gaze on the horizon. The sun was higher now, its warmth spreading across the land. A quiet realization settled over him. He had walked through fire and emerged stronger. Then a sound, the distant growl of engines. His hand instinctively tightened around the bottle, but as the noise grew, he realized it wasn't the familiar snarls of motorcycles. It was a convoy of trucks, their trailers gleaming under the morning sun. The lead truck slowed as it passed. Keanu recognized the bearded driver from the diner. The man gave him a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared experience, before continuing down the road. Keanu watched as the convoy disappeared into the distance, a small smile tugging at his lips. The road ahead was uncertain. The threats of the night still loomed like shadows at the edges of his mind. But he felt no fear, only determination. Adjusting the mirror one last time, he set his sights on the horizon. The journey wasn't over, but he was ready for whatever came next. With a firm grip on the wheel and a quiet resolve in his heart, Keanu drove forward into the light of a new day.